it made me feel like nothing. It made me feel like I didn't exist. It made me feel that I wasn't important. And it made me feel like that he was in the right and I was wrong. And that's also what Doc Gary told me, was that it was my fault because I put myself in that situation. And the combination of these and him being paraded around, them letting him take the Stanley Cup to a high school with kids after they knew what had happened, there's no words to describe it, right? There really isn't.
How can people across our country watch this and not be angry, knowing that this team was putting winning a Stanley Cup ahead of someone's life, and knowing that when they decided to turn a blind eye to this and bury it and cover it up and allow Brad Aldrich to leave with a letter of recommendation with thousands of dollars in severance and a Stanley Cup playoff bonus, he left that organization and he went on to abuse others at Miami University in Ohio. And then when he got caught doing that, he resigned and left and went to Michigan and coached a high school boys hockey team where he was convicted of sexually abusing a 16-year-old player at the time.
Former first-round draft pick Kyle Beach revealed to TSN yesterday he was the one who filed a lawsuit against the Chicago Blackhawks over its handling of sexual assault allegations made against a member of the team's coaching staff in 2010. An independent review commissioned by the team found senior team leaders largely ignored his allegations, focusing instead on the team's quest for the Stanley Cup, which it won weeks after Beach came forward.
His brave admission, the scathing report, and subsequent actions of the league are raising important questions about the culture within the NHL. Joining us tonight with a closer look, Michael Landsberg, co-founder of the organization Sick Not Weak, a longtime sports journalist as well, and Bruce Arthur, sports columnist for the Toronto Star. Thank you both. We're so grateful you're here. Bruce, I want to start with you because one of the reasons we wanted to have you on tonight is I was really struck about what you said in your column, which really, I think, hit the nail on the head here. You talked about how Kyle Beach was there in front of this country trying not to fall apart. Well, at the same time, Joel Quenneville, coach of the Florida Panthers, was there coaching his team to their latest win, and the NHL saying, we'll have a meeting with him tomorrow. Is the NHL that tone deaf to what we're all seeing here as a lack of accountability, and once again, the failure of the system and they're failing this young man?
So far, the answer is yes. And I don't enjoy saying that, and I'm not surprised by it. The NHL has never been anything but a reactive league. It's not a league with a huge amount of vision, and it's not a league with a huge amount of empathy for those who fall outside of the league's kind of approved class. And what's happened here is that allowing Joel Quenneville to coach, and then the meeting today, it doesn't sound like that resolved anything for today. I'm not sure how that is allowed to happen.
And that's what I wanted to ask you, Bruce.
Yeah.
Because, you said in your column it was so utterly predictable. It was hockey. And Darren Drager of TSN said, based on the meeting today, that Quenneville's employment, he says all options remain on the table. His employment hangs in the air. In any other organization, you would not be able to continue and carry out your job on a day when there are scathing allegations made against you. And at the same time, it's a question mark as to if Quenneville's terminated or not. Where is this accountability?
Well, I understand wanting to wait before you make a huge decision, but the facts of this case seem relatively clear. And that's what bothers me is Joel Quenneville lied about this in the summer. Mm-hmm. If the report is to be believed, the report that was independent, commissioned by the Chicago Blackhawks, released, if it's to be believed, then Joel Quenneville lied about whether he knew about this, which means he was part of the group that covered it up for 10 years. And he knew this investigation was coming. I can't believe the brazen, just kind of the guts he had, not guts is the wrong word, but like the chutzpah he had to say, I didn't know about this. The people who knew about this should never work in hockey again. The people who knew and had decision-making power in that organization, that includes the general manager of the Winnipeg Jets, Kevin Cheveldayoff, Joel Quenneville, and anyone who's left with the Chicago Blackhawks.
Michael, I want to ask you about the impact, the bravery, and the impact as a result of Kyle Beach going on national television to reveal himself as John Doe, to give details about his story, what happened to him, and what that means for viewers and fans of sport across this country and beyond.
Well, I think it's a wake-up call to hockey fans. Not that they should have needed a wake-up call. I mean, I love hockey, and I have sort of worked in the hockey world, interviewing hockey players and coaches for years. But, time and time again, I'm shocked at the cavalier attitude about, in general, the health of the players that play. As long as they can play the games that they want them to play, everything's okay. This is appalling for a lot of different reasons, starting with, as you were saying, Bruce, Joel Quenneville. Think about this. Joel Quenneville said, well, I was told, because he only was at half that meeting on, I guess it was May the 23rd, after they had qualified for the Stanley Cup Finals. He said, I only knew that a coach apparently had done something sort of suspicious to a player. That's all I knew. Are you telling me that a head coach of a hockey team could possibly hear that a coach assaulted a player on his team and not ask who the coach was? Not ask who the player was? I mean, the whole thing just, it stinks. It stinks so badly. And like Bruce said, it hurts me to say that with this game, but it's appalling. And what did they do? They penalized the Chicago Blackhawks. What, $2 million? What is that? In the scheme of penalizing an organization, $2 million. Basically, that is saying, hey, you know what? We got to do something. So, hey, just ride this out.
Bruce, what does it say that, these are allegations that were made 10 years ago, that there was a process, that there was potentially a cover-up here, that there was a Stanley Cup win in the midst of all of this, and everything that we have talked about that has been brought to the surface, the Me Too movement, supporting survivors, everything we've learned in the last decade, and here we are, telling this story 10 years, more than 10 years later, and these themes continue, these themes of, not holding people accountable.
Well, this isn't new, right? I called Sheldon Kennedy, who's one of the great Canadians we've ever had, who's been fighting against sexual abuse in and out of sports for 25 years. And he said this all felt very familiar, because a culture of silence, an institution that believes itself more important than the people within it, a lack of leadership within that institution when the people within it are threatened or damaged. These are things that we've seen even recently in USA Gymnastics, in women's soccer. We've seen it in the Catholic Church. You go back 10 years, you saw it at Penn State, where another head coach, his defense was, I didn't know enough. And Joe Paterno, one of the most famous and valued coaches in American football, had to resign. This is something that happens all over the place. The fact that we listen now is the important part.
Right. Something we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the show is a report from one of sports' across the world's governing bodies. According to their members, 13% of them have been victims of sexual abuse in sport. That's more than 1 in 10 athletes, young athletes. And as you noted, Bruce, this has been going on forever. It's only now we're starting to talk about it. In saying that, something I haven't heard much about is Gary Bettman has been the longtime commissioner of the NHL, in which this system of silence and this abuse has persisted. Are there not questions calling for him to go? Because this organization, this abuse has thrived under what is his leadership as well.
I would say this problem is much bigger than Gary Bettman. I would also mention Don Fear, the head of the Players Union, because Kyle Beach put in a complaint to the Players Union through the correct channels and nothing came of it. The NHLPA has apologized. They should explain what happened, because that's an enormous failure. At least with the league and the team, they're not expected to really look out for the players as much as the Players Union should. But in terms of hockey and its culture, you talk to people in this game and they say from 5 or 6 years old, you're told whatever happens in the room stays in the room, right? There is absolutely a cult of the coach, a cult of the game, a cult of institutions. Like, take a look at my junior hockey in Canada. There's a class action lawsuit alleging hazing abuse over decades within the sport. A comparable sport with a comparable structure would be something like minor league baseball. Have we seen that in minor league baseball? We haven't. Hockey has a problem. And again, this is not under Gary's purview. Gary and what he knew when, why he didn't launch an investigation in the summer, that needs to be answered. I don't think he's close to the biggest problem here. How he reacts and how he deals with Quenneville, Cheveldayoff, and the Chicago Blackhawks going forward, that's going to be his big role to play.
And Michael, if you read the report, woven throughout this idea of there being a code of silence and a culture of silence are, these ideas of toxic masculinity, homophobia that are pervasive as well, that sort of all play into this culture of silence. How do you come at the problem? How do you, it sounds to me like that hockey, professional hockey, it starts in, the minor league, as we heard there from Bruce. How do you get at the problem without there being this sort of massive reckoning that is the responsibility of everybody, the parents, the coaches, the players, everyone that's involved?
From my standpoint, there's something that's alarming as you're talking about that. Everything is alarming when it comes to this. But I want to ask Bruce a question. I was thinking about this because I was watching Duncan Keith, the Edmonton Oilers defenseman, who was a great player for the Chicago Blackhawks in that year, talking about he didn't know anything. And I was thinking, my experience with interviewing hockey players, and this is going to sound terrible, but mostly it's lies. When you talk about what happens on the ice, it's mostly lies. When you ask a coach about a hit that his team, a player on his team made, the coach would say, "Nah, I thought it was a legal hit." You ask a player about his relationship with another player, it's all swept under the table. You never, ever, ever get an honest answer unless it suits the player. If the storyline is a good one for the player, then you'll hear it. But when you ask Duncan Keith the question, and I don't know if he knew, but if you ask him that question, for me, I'm predisposed to going, I don't believe him.
Mm-hmm. I'll say this. Kyle Beach alleged that there were homophobic kind of terms thrown around after the incident. He believed everybody knew. Mm-hmm. There are still players from that team, like Jonathan Toews, acclaimed as one of the greatest leaders in the game, Patrick Kane, Duncan Keith, who say they didn't know. The people who say they did know, and this is players who played for that team or in that organization, are always the people who are out of the league now. And what does that tell you? Mm-hmm. It tells you that if you're in the league, like maybe they're telling the truth, but based on what we see, the fact that the players who are no longer, that whether they don't have any fidelity to the team anymore, to the sport, to the league, they don't have anything to lose, I feel like they're more likely to be the ones telling the truth.
Let me just jump in and say that
please.
There's, this game that we Canadians love and is so ingrained in our culture. Has just gone off in so many bad directions, which doesn't mean that the game itself isn't great, but just the lack of honesty when it comes to the game itself, like all of the things that you will never get an honest answer from when it comes to concussions or drug use or all of the things that really concern us. And you hear from players later in life who like Nick Boynton is one of the guys that came out and talked about this. Nick Boynton, I know, I talked to him yesterday. Here's a guy who is suffering terribly from the concussions he had, the lifestyle that he lived, the painkillers that he took, and no one will ever talk about it until, as you said, Bruce, they're ex-players who don't want to get back in the game.
And Michael, we of course want to talk about the survivors. That is important. I'm going to get back to have one more question here for Bruce. I'm wondering, Bruce, if you think the NHL continues to view these allegations as a workplace matter, a personnel matter, as opposed to what it really is. It's a crime.
That's a really good question. I expect them. I think all options are on the table right now. I don't expect an awful lot. I don't expect this to be considered a crime. I expect this to be viewed as a workplace issue. But again, that's where the union falling down is still shocking to me. Yeah. What you need in this situation is you need, and talk to Sheldon Kennedy about this. He's the expert. He's been doing it forever. You need an independent reporting system that is outside of the sport but has authority to do something about it. And the union was supposed to be that. It was not. Hockey needs an outlet for people. And it's not just at the NHL level, it's all the way down through. Because as Michael noted, this is a sport that is so insular, that is worshipped to such a degree in this country that we overlook its flaws. People don't want to hear it. And that means that if you are a victim of this system in any way, you don't think anyone wants to hear you either.
And on that note, Michael, thank you so much, Bruce. Something Jackie and I really wanted to speak to you about is survivors. You speak to so many athletes about their mental health in all areas of the game and in life after the game. And Kyle Beach was quite clear, and we've heard this many times before. He turned to alcohol. It destroyed his marriage. These comments he's making are not surprising.
No, I think it's all related. You know, you talk about the homophobia and you talk about, you know, the fear of being found out and the threats that the coach Aldridge made to Beach, who essentially he said, you know, I'll kill your career if you don't do what it is I want you to do. And how the mental illness that this always follows from, right? You know, it's almost a 1-to-1 ratio, right? You know, you get sexually abused by your coach, you're going to have mental health challenges and addiction challenges. And it's kind of like they're all wrapped up in one, in this cloak of secrecy that has existed and prevented players from coming forward, which I still think exists today. I still think that bad stuff could go on and players are going to always be devoted to the greater good of the team, which in their minds is trying to win hockey games. And at a certain point, who gives a damn about the hockey games? And you know, the funny thing is, you talk to a player after he's retired and he looks back, he doesn't care as much about those hockey games as he seemed to at the time, to sacrifice, you know, his values and friendships. It's really sad that this is the place that we're at.
Bruce, again, in reading portions of this report and seeing all of the various people that were involved and, you know, some of the behind the scenes that what happened, you know, you wonder if this is going to be sort of an impetus for other people to come forward, whether it's people involved in a scenario very similar to this or beyond within the NHL. Do you think that this is going to, and specifically Kyle's bravery, is going to spark more people coming forward with their own stories?
I think Kyle's bravery and how he's been received. I mean, think about the Me Too movement. Just think about the name of the Me Too movement. What is it? It happened to me too, right? And if Kyle Beach is the only person out there that has been abused in the course of playing hockey, then it would be wonderful news in its own terrible way. But that's not the case. So I do think that if you see that the sport treats him well, and this is where the NHL can really play a role, and everyone can, if you see that he is supported, that he's loved, that he's listened to, that is only going to encourage more people who've been damaged by the sport, and not just the sport, other institutions as well, to come forward.
Bruce Arthur with the Toronto Star, thank you so much for, you know, continuing to shine a light on this. Like I said, I thought your column was bang on, so thanks so much. And Michael Landsberg, for your analysis and always your advocacy for continuing to bring a voice on matters on mental health for athletes and really everyone. So thank you both for taking the time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.